G'day, I'm April Spadina and welcome to my studio for the day. I'm on the banks of the beautiful Mary River, the mighty Mary in Queensland, and this is my stomping ground. This is where my family business is, so I often come down here and just enjoy being on the water and seeing the beautiful view. And I've got my dogs here with me, Nala and Marlo. They like it here too. And so I thought I'd come down here today and do a little bit of plein air painting. Plein air painting is where you paint outdoors and you absorb all of the beautiful energy, and you're actually at the location that you're painting, so you get to paint and all of your emotions and the sounds and the smells and all of the experience that you're actually feeling at that moment goes into your painting. And it can be a little bit tricky if you've got changing skies, or if you've got like cows in a field that are moving around, or if you've got, like, it starts off when you first start your painting, it might be a beautiful clear day, and then by the time you've finished your painting it's overcast, so you kind of have to work on the fly, and it can be quite unpredictable. So today I'm going to be doing a couple of little paintings with watercolour and just a little bit of charcoal drawing here, and my light's fading pretty quickly, so I'm just going to do some really quick drawings. But first of all, I just wanted to show you about my travel bag that I take with me. So this is my handy little travel kit. A friend gave me this beautiful felt bag. It's nice and sturdy, and I love it. And I keep this in the boot of my car, and it's really handy. It's got all the things that I need in it. If I ever feel like when I'm out somewhere and I've got a beautiful view, I can just whip out what I need, and everything's small and lightweight, so it's handy to have. It doesn't take up much room. So first of all, I have a couple of watercolour pads, and they're just little ones. I like to work on small scale when I'm doing watercolour. They're handy to have, and I take two, because if I've done a watercolour on one and it's drying and it's still wet, I can just pull out the other one and do some watercolour on that one if I feel like it. Then I've got another couple of little sketch pads that I carry with me as well. These aren't watercolour, they're just sketch pads, which are nice just to have if I'm in a cafe or something and I feel like doing a little sketch. I'll pull these out and do little drawings. Then I have my beautiful watercolour travel kit here, and it's got this little reservoir pen. These are so handy because you fill this section up with water. Did I say reservoir pen? I meant reservoir paintbrush. So you fill that section up with water, and then you use this section, you just give it a squeeze and the water comes out the end. Just haven't tightened that on tight enough, and it comes out the end, and then you dip it into your paint and use it, and then when you want to clean it, you just squeeze it and it cleans the end of the brush up. It's very, very handy, and you don't really need to take water with you when you've got that, so you could just get away with using this and a sketch pad, and you pop the end of it back on again and it's sealed for next time. I have this beautiful kit. This box had a beautiful Chinese calligraphy brush in it. My husband brought it back from China for me, and the brush unfortunately just sort of disintegrated over time, but I love the box. It's really special, and I just keep my little paintbrushes. It's magnetic, so it stays together, and then I keep my brushes and pencils in here. This brush here is pretty special because I got this when I was a teenager, and I was doing a Chinese calligraphy course. So that's a little bit special. It's many years old. have a pencil sharpener, an eraser, and that's just a handy little kit. I have my little tin of hairspray, which is just a little tin so it doesn't take up much room and it's nice and light. And I use that as a fixative if I'm doing something that's not really important and I don't want to preserve it. But I also carry sometimes a bigger tin of fixative for if I want to do something that's a little bit more special. And I take my tins that are nearly empty, so they don't weigh much, but there's enough in there to spray a piece of artwork if I need it. I have water. I have a little this little tub. It's got tissues in it, and I use those for blotting my watercolour paint. It's a little packet of tissues, a little travel pack, and that sort of sits on the end of my water bottle so it doesn't take up any room. Hope you can see the duck flying across there. That was that noise that you could hear before. That was that duck. I have this lovely tin that my mum brought back from France, I think, many years ago, and it had boiled lollies in it. This is a beautiful tin. It now has my charcoal in it. I've got all different sizes in there, and there's some bits of eraser in there as well, all covered in charcoal but still usable. And that's my little tin that I carry. I have a couple of clips just in case it's a windy day, some minties for a little bit of sustenance, and I have some business cards in here as well. And that's it. That's my little travel kit, and it all fits into that little bag, and it's really handy. I can take it anywhere with me. Rightio, so I did try to paint and draw and talk at the same time, and it just wound up being ridiculous. I was waffling on like some crazy woman. Clearly I can't multitask, so I've decided to talk you through what my process was as I go along and see how we go with this. So what I'm doing here is I'm penciling in my little design. I am using a soft pencil and I'm just gently penciling it in, no detail or anything, just to get my positioning right of where I'm going to be doing my little painting. And I'm putting my masts in now. I've got a low horizon, so what I did was I drew a little square around where I wanted my painting to sit. Instead of painting it over the entire surface of my paper, I'm just framing out just one little section, and then I've got a low horizon with my boat sitting on the water. And I'm not pressing too heavily with my pencil because I don't want to score the paper, so I'm just doing really light lines that I'll be able to rub out after I finish my painting, just so that I can get an idea about what's going to happen when I start painting. I've got my little tree line there as well behind the boat. As you can see, it's a very hazy day. It's because of the fires over on Fraser Island, so everything's like this soft kind of purpley, hazy, browny kind of colour. I'm painting in the background at the moment using my soft Chinese calligraphy brush, and I'm just using water, so I'm just wetting the background, and then I've made up a bit of a browny kind of smoky solution of paint, and I'm just adding that to my watered background, and that'll just do its own thing. Because the pontoon was on a lean a little bit, the watercolour was running to the top of the page, which I didn't want, so I've just propped it up at the back there so it runs down the page instead. And you don't really want to do too much when you're working with watercolour in a sky, because it tends to do its own lovely thing. So I've done my watercolour wash on my sky, and those little parts that I've left out, they'll become sort of kind of like little cloud streaks through the sky. And now I'm putting in my trees in my background. And I don't mind if this bleeds into the sky a little bit, because that's the nature of working with watercolour. It is lovely and bleedy and washy. So I don't want it to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect painting. It's just a little fun exercise. And I like the way watercolour does its own thing and bleeds into the other colours. I've added a little darker section along the bottom there, and that'll bleed into the top section of the trees. And then I'll come back later on and work that a little bit more when it starts to dry off a bit. Once again, I'm just adding clear water to the bottom part of my picture now. This is where the water is going to be. So I'm just wetting it with clear water. And then I'm going to use the same sort of colour that I put in the sky, with just probably, I think I added a little bit of Payne's grey to it, just to darken it down a little bit and make the muddy kind of wash in the water. The Mary River is a muddy river, so it's not a blue, shiny, clear watered river. It is a muddy river, and particularly on this day, that day that I was painting this, it was that overcast, smoky sky day, so the water was particularly brown, the reflection. It was such a hazy day. So I just pulled out some more of that water, that paint that I put on there, because I didn't really like it being so heavy. So I just wet my brush, dried it off a little bit, and then wiped that out. And that's all I'm going to do on that one for the time being. I've just set it to the side to dry. And while it's drying, I'm going to start my next picture, which is going to be exactly the same scene, but I'm going to do it in charcoal. So I do the same thing. I shape out my border of where my picture is going to be, just gently using the side of my charcoal, and I'm going to put my horizon in there, and these are my trees. So I'm using the side of my charcoal. I rarely use the point of my charcoal, especially when I'm starting out, until I start doing my detail. So I've put my trees in, and then my sky and my water, which I'm smudging in now with my fingers, just smudging that all through there, smudging that tree line, leaving that little gap, which is where my boat's going to be. And I'm getting my fine charcoal, willow charcoal stick now, and I'm just putting in, like I did with the other one, I'm just putting in basically where my boat's going to sit. That's a little bit too high then. No detail. And then I'll smudge that water through. And then come back with my thick piece of charcoal again and add that darkness to those trees again. And then now I know where my boat's going to go, so I can sort of cut in around the shape of the boat with my charcoal. And then smudge it again gently with my finger. Smudge all of that up. And now I'm going to use my kneadable eraser, and kneadable eraser is kind of like the same consistency as blue tack. and you stretch it out, and it cleans all the charcoal off it, or the graphite or whatever you're using it for. By stretching it like that, you're cleaning it, and then you can mold it into the shape that you want and press it into your paper to take out whatever it is that you've put on there. So I'm just pressing it into the sky to create some soft clouds in the sky. I'll just add a little bit more charcoal to that, just to make it look a little bit more dramatic, and make those clouds stand up more against the sky. There are really no clouds in the sky on this day. It was just a hazy day, so there were no clouds in the sky, but I'm putting them in because it's called artistic license, and I thought that it might look interesting with a few clouds up there. There we go. That's pretty much my clouds. And then I'm going to use my other eraser and just pull out a few little glistening lines on top of the surface of the water, just using the edge of the eraser. And using the sharp edge, I'm just cutting in around that edge of the boat there, picking it out against the dark background now. And those little masts as well. Then I'm going to give it another spray, a spray with spray fixative, and when that's dry, it's a minute later, I can go back in now, and the next layer of charcoal that I put on there is going to be darker than the last layer because of the fixative. So every time you spray it with fixative, your next layer of charcoal that you put in over the top of it is going to be a shade darker. And I can pick in all around the boat there with that, and then go and smudge it again. This is just layering up your values. This isn't going to be, neither of these pictures are going to be awesome or, you know, fabulous, but it's just it's just an exercise, and it's just great to be outdoors and working out in the open with this beautiful view in front of me. So I'm using the edge of this charcoal again. I probably, in hindsight, I should have just snapped that end of that off so it gave me a sharper edge, but I really didn't want to go into this with adding too much detail to my drawing. I did want it to be sort of semi-abstract-y, kind of a little bit loose, and maybe a little bit impressionistic, because I'm not really one to put a lot of detail into my work anyway. So I didn't want to risk having a really sharp edge of that charcoal and then winding up putting way too much detail in it than I really wanted. So the end of that little stick of charcoal is quite rounded over. And because I'm working with that pad on the ground, that watercolour pad is sitting on the ground in front of me, I didn't really have much control over what I was doing, because I was sort of reaching down and working on a strange angle, which also didn't do me any favours when it comes to detail and working with really straight lines. As you can see, all my lines are very wobbly and not very well controlled. That's okay, because I was having fun. in the back of that boat. It's a little bit too big, but that's alright. And we're going to make a little pointy bit on the end of this kneadable eraser and just dab it there on the end of that boat, on the back of that boat, to bring it out, and around that little cabin. I realise at this point that my masts really aren't tall enough either, so I'm going to go in and make them taller. And then that means I have to change where that rigging sits, because it's on the wrong angle now. And I've grabbed a little fine dry paintbrush just to take away that charcoal from the inside of that rigging that I couldn't get my finger into that to wipe it away. So I just used a paintbrush instead, which is a handy little tip to know. Then I just sprayed it with spray fixative, and by this stage, because it's such a hot day, my watercolour painting has dried, and I'm ready to go back and start putting in some little bit of detail. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. My light's fading very quickly by this stage, so I better hurry up and start working faster. So I'm just going to grab any colour off the palette here. It's like a dark kind of neutral colour, and start to just add a little bit of detail. And that's the thing with working on plein air. You have to work quickly because of the changing light and the changing scenery. I mean, for all I know, I could have been halfway through this picture and that boat could have pulled its anchor up and sailed away. But that's just the beauty of working with an unpredictable environment. Watercolour is also an unpredictable medium. You never know what it's going to do. Well, I don't know what it's going to do. Just put those little portholes in there and a little window in front of the cabin. I didn't really like the thickness of that waterline underneath it, so what I did was I wet my paintbrush with water and then dried it on my tissue, and then swiped it underneath that edge of that waterline there underneath the boat, and took that thick edge of watercolour paint away, because I could still do that because it's not fully dry. Now I've picked my paper up and I'm holding it on an angle so that I've got more control when I do these masts and the rigging. So I've wiped my brush and taken a lot of the paint off it, so when I do my rigging it's going to be finer lines. And just a suggestion, because they're just wires. Now I'm going to put this dark tree line back in behind it again. Just a wash of darker green over there. And that'll make the boat stand out a little bit more too. And like I said, this is not a fabulous piece of art, but it's an enjoyable day out in the open painting. And that's pretty much finished now. That's a finished quick little, whoops, see what just happened then? But check this out. Oh, look at that, I fixed it. How cool. So that's a finished piece of watercolour artwork, and I'll just rub out those pencil lines and then that's finished. And that's a finished charcoal drawing, and they only took a couple of minutes. A couple of minutes to do those, which is pretty cool. And now look at that view. Oh, I just can't get enough of it. But even better, this is when all of the flying foxes are flying along in the sky. Can you see them? Look at that up there against the sunset. You can see the flying foxes all flying off for their nighttime dinner. It's just absolutely stunning. I cannot get enough of this view. It is so beautiful. And the parkland behind, on the other side of the bank, Queen's Park, that's an historical parkland, and there's all heritage buildings, beautiful, beautiful heritage buildings across the other side at Port Side. That's the old sailing club, and that's the Brolga Theatre. The Rowers Club over there. The rowers come along the river in the afternoon and mornings. It's beautiful, especially on a really gorgeous evening like this. Oh, and there we see a bat flying over the top. So there we have it. I've nearly run out of light. Perfect timing. And I've really enjoyed myself. I know the dogs have. Come here, Marlo, and say hello. Hello. And Nala. Say hello, my big girls. So I've had a great time down here on the river painting, and you know, my little paintings that I did, they're not that great. They're just a little bit of fun, and I know that I'm not going to be doing anything with them, just keeping them in my sketch pad. But it's nice to get out and draw outside, and draw and paint outside the studio, a different location, and with my girls, my doggies. Yes, I love you too. So thanks for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I will see you next time. Bye.